I am Atanu, and I am here to talk about my research with Abhijeet Ghoshal and Debabrata that has just appeared in the latest issue of MIS Quarterly, that is the final issue of 2017. Let's begin with what motivated this work. This was originally motivated by our personal experience with Windows XP to Windows 7 migration. But this research applies to all kinds of software, including database systems, operating systems, special purpose applications, and desktop utilities. In fact, all software vendors face the same conundrum. Ideally, a vendor wants to pronounce the aging version, for example Windows XP, dead to attract consumers to the newly launched one, for example Windows 7 or Windows 10. Because the new version then becomes the only way for consumers to enjoy a secure software. However, we also find that in many cases, for example in the case of Windows XP, the vendor actually extended the support beyond the promised date. And in many cases, this happens after consumers have upgraded to secure software. Now, the reason is as follows. If the vendor raises the price for the upgrade from the aging version to the new version too much to exploit consumers' willingness to move to a secure software, the vendor runs into a commitment problem. A higher price keeps many consumers away from upgrading, leading to a situation where the vendor finds it too risky to end support and leave a huge number of consumers vulnerable to debilitating attacks. So the vendor ends up backtracking on its commitment to end support on the promised date. So this is exactly the commitment problem we are talking about. Put another way, the vendor cannot charge a high price. The high price is meaningless unless the vendor also has a convincing way of telling consumers that it's not going to backtrack. So in the absence of credible commitment, a high price for an upgrade to a secure software cannot be an equilibrium. And that's precisely the commitment problem we study in this work. Now, we find several interesting results, but perhaps the most puzzling result is the equilibrium itself. We find that in the no commitment equilibrium, so in the equilibrium in which the vendor has no means to commit, the vendor's profit is actually increasing in the cost of extending support for the older release. So higher the cost to extend support for Windows XP, the vendor can make actually more money on Windows 7 or Windows 10. Think about that for a minute. Higher cost and higher profit. How often do they go together? Almost never. But in this case, that's precisely what we find. Now, why is that? Because if the cost to extend support is higher, then consumers are more likely to be convinced that the vendor would not extend support. And in that case, they would have a greater willingness to upgrade to the new version. So in other words, the solution to this problem that the vendor faces is actually inflating the cost, quote unquote inflating the cost, and not cost cutting. In this case, profit cannot be increased by cost cutting. In this case, profit can only be increased by cost inflating. So in other words, inflating the cost is essentially the commitment mechanism that we want to devise in this work. And that's precisely what we discuss in this work. All the mathematical derivations and the details are in the paper. And in addition to several interesting results, some also discuss welfare implications of the decision to end support. And I'm sure you will enjoy the paper if you read it. And if there are any questions, please give me or my co-authors a holler. Again, thanks for watching. Bye.